We're good to go.
Live? Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the December 14th meeting of the Cedar Rapids Community School District's Audit Committee. With the agenda would have been posted, I'm presuming. So we're going to begin with number one, our agenda, and that is to review and approve the minutes from the September 9th, 2020 meeting and the October 14th meetings. Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Whitney, so moved.
I'm sorry, what?
This is Whitney, so move.
Thank you, Whitney.
John Hammer, second.
Thank you, John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent, thank you. Before we move ahead to Sherry, I did want to ask Dave if we could include in these minutes some kind of language as to why we didn't have the November meeting. And you and I have discussed this, I know, but I think that it would be important to have something in the written minutes that we couldn't have it because of technical problems or whatever the explanation that we're aware of is. If that, I don't know if we need a motion to do that. I just think it would be good for the history of the committee that we have an explanation.
Or we can make sure we take care of that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dave. All right then, moving to the second item on the agenda is Sherry. She's going to be talking about the various asset management procedures, and for new members, and I'm sure you're all knowledgeable after our October meeting, but if you're curious about our policies, they're out on the district's website. And each time we review a few, and we're going to let Sherry discuss those at this time. Sherry?
Thank you, Maureen. So please note that in the audit committee package, beginning on page 4, if you have your audit committee packet, that lists the board policy 706 and regulation 706.1. That's for our capital assets. At the bottom of page 4, I wanted to make it clear that is not part of the board policy. On that, I added my notes on our physical inventory and on tracking technology, food nutrition, and federally funded assets. That's just an informational piece. Excuse me. So today I'm going to discuss the current procedures and processes that are in place. So asset management procedures. Asset management, that's our software. AssetWorks, that's the company. So in March of 2018, a team from AssetWorks did a physical inventory of all the assets in our district. Assets are assigned numbers through asset tags. Scanners were used to conduct the inventory. All of the information was then uploaded to asset management. That's the district software. This was a very thorough process. It took about 6 months from beginning to end, and it did go very well. If you'd like more information on the physical inventory, we can discuss that further. Completing the physical inventory and having the asset management software removed our audit findings from our CAFR, or our annual financial statements, beginning in FY14. At that time, we didn't have an adequate process to track assets. We did have asset software. Prior to that, the company went out of business, no longer support on the software. When I came in 2010, our assets were being tracked on an Excel spreadsheet. So that was not sufficient, and that was the finding in the audit for a few years there. We knew it was not sufficient. The decision was also made in 2010. We were in FEMA trailers because of the flood. So that was a 4-year stay at the FEMA trailers. So we knew that we wanted to wait until we were out of the trailers. Everything got back in place. The ELSC was built. The warehouse was moved and in place, and Taylor Elementary was in place. So we did work with our auditors with that understanding, and we did know we would have that finding for a few years until we were in place. So after that, and everything was settled, and it was 2012, it was about 2013. We moved to the ELSC in 2012. 2013, that first physical inventory took place with our new company. So our capital asset threshold is $5,000, which includes installation, shipping, and handling, and they're capitalized in the asset management system. And at that time, assets $500 and over require tracking for insurance purposes, detecting fraud, district accountability. The determination between equipment and supplies. Equipment would be longer than the 12 months. It'd be like the machinery, furniture, fixtures, vehicles, athletic equipment, musical instruments versus the supplies. We do have some other software that we use at our district. Our libraries use a company or software called Destiny Library System to keep track of their books and their items in their libraries. Our school buses all have stickered numbers, and they're also tracked through a vehicle identification number. I know they do reporting to the state every year on the vehicles. Musical instruments, our facilitator uses a software called Charms. And then technology uses a software called Sherwell for all of the computers, iPads, laptops. Those all are necessary to be tracked because they move a lot. And it's important to keep track of what you have in your district, even though those may be under, a lot of them would be under the $500. So the process, assets are tracked, and they're basically done through purchasing. BSO is our purchasing system. So purchasing software for the district, the majority of the purchases and payments or payment requests, RPAs, they go through BSO, our purchasing system. Through this process, the items are marked as assets, and then when they're received at the warehouse, the assets are tagged. Also, the items are given a 700 object number for their account number. The last 3 digits of our account numbers are called objects, and the 700 would indicate that capital assets or equipment. So equipment transfer, we have an equipment transfer asset form on the Cedar Rapids website, and this is used as a tracking system. It's used when we acquire, transfer, and dispose of assets. It's an online request form, and it's used for also requested asset tags if items didn't go through the warehouse. Donations are also recorded there. The form then routes from the warehouse, it routes to accounting, and then monthly, there's updates to the asset system by the accounting supervisor. The accounting supervisor pulls all the 700 objects, which we talked about just a few minutes ago. They identified the equipment. She pulls that from the finance system, compares that to the BSO, the purchasing system, and then to this equipment transfer asset form to see that all the assets are recorded. And then at year end, after all reconciling's done, asset management runs the depreciation for us for the fiscal year, and that information is pulled for our audit. And in our audit, there is note number 5 dedicated to capital assets, which when our CAFR is presented, we can take a look at that. But that is all dedicated to capital assets, and it lists the land, the buildings, the furniture. It separates the business types, gives the beginning balances, additions, retirements, and then the balance for the current year. So technology and food nutrition, they do their own physical inventories. They give this information to the accounting supervisor to update and upload. The accounting supervisor does a physical inventory for capital assets over $5,000, identified as being purchased with federal funding every 2 years. This is done because it's required by the federal government that these are audited and inventoried every couple of years. And the 2 years puts us right in between the 5 years of when we were going to bring in the company to do a complete physical inventory. So that is happening right now. We're right at the 2.5 years. This was started in the fall. Washington High School was completed. And then there were delays between the derecho and COVID and schools being out. That then got put on hold until the spring, which was pretty much our goal, either fall or spring, because there's a little more wiggle room there for this to happen. So it'll be finished in the spring. So that is what we currently do. There will be some changes because we are going to our new finance system in FY21, July 1st. And we have been making some preparations along the way with our asset management, our training, our software, and even our physical inventories. So it's quite interesting. I would ask Dave if he wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to, and especially about the physical inventories that I've been talking about and the possibility of videotaping. Dave, if you'd like to pick that up from here, I would appreciate it.
You bet. Just making sure. Can you guys hear me? I can't see my mic.
I can.
Good. Yeah, with our change in our new software, we are combining a lot of different systems into one system now, and fixed assets is one of those. We have a separate system today, and that will be rolled into our new accounting software and HR software system. So that will be all encompassing, and it will kind of operate the same type of way where things are controlled through purchasing, and they are identified as an asset based on the account code that's being used, and it will kind of trigger to go into a queue of waiting it to be kind of rolled into the fixed asset system and capitalized in that manner. We will also make sure that we include in our fixed assets the federal items that need to be tracked. We're going to include those, even though they don't necessarily meet our capitalization threshold, but we still need to track those assets, and we will make sure that our process is set up to be able to capture those and handle that. And as for some of the changes that we were looking at doing for inventory purposes, for insurance purposes, things that are not capitalizable, we have kind of two types of things that we were doing previously. We were having our technology folks tracked all computers, iPads, and those types of things. They had an inventory of that. And we also took that information, what they had inventory of it, and put it into our current fixed asset system as well. And we tracked it as well there. The most up-to-date data was always what technology had. We would get up to, our system would be updated periodically, but the most up-to-date data was really what the technology had. So technology is still going to track their information, and we're going to we'll still do that, but we are not going to take the time to roll that information into our fixed assets system within Infinite Visions. And instead of trying to use that for insurance purposes, we are looking at actually having a video done of all of our schools, of all our assets in classrooms, and they'll actually walk into the classroom and record, say, this is this classroom, and they'll do a 360 of everything in that classroom, and it's on a video. Because so many things that if we did lost a whole building due to a fire or whatever, what we had in capitalized in the system as an asset in the system was not everything in the classroom, really. It did not go to the student desk. It did not go to the student chairs. It did not do all of that type of stuff. It was, things that were over $500. So it was not capturing everything. So we now, having a video, it will be a much better way that we can go back to. It would be tedious, but at least we would have a video of what we have in the classroom. It's kind of like if you meet with your insurance agent, personal insurance agent, they probably too are would encourage you to say, hey, take photos or take a video of what you have. So in case something does happen, you have something to go back to and try to help determine what items that you have lost in the event. So that's kind of where we're moving to in the future. But for the update for today's, we were thinking that we would be, in a new world, in a new system this year, but because of COVID, we had to put everything on hold, our implementation, and now we're, everything got kind of shifted a year, and we'll go live July 1, like Sherry said before.
Excuse me, Dave, did you say July next year?
Correct.
Okay. If I can ask another question, having come from government also, so if you're doing the video of the rooms, then I'm presuming there's also going to be a video policy that nobody raids rooms for the better chair or anything if it's already captured in that room, right?
Say that again.
Of course, I'm sure the school district's better than most governments, but it was if someone left their office or something and there was a nice chair, for example, it suddenly was moved. That tightened up. I wondered if the district was also considering policies like that, that if it's in classroom A, it stays in classroom A.
Well, I couldn't necessarily say that we'll go to that level, especially on the number of chairs and desks, because that stuff moves. It does move, and even with what we had before, we didn't have an accounting of all of that in each classroom. This will be at least something better than what we had before if we activated a video. Yeah. Not necessarily going to always say, this was what, if we lost a whole building, and we go back to that video, that's probably going to be the best thing that we had, even though, would it be necessarily 100% accurate? No, because there could be things that had been purchased in between the time we did the video and the time, and things could have moved around a little bit. But we will still do all the capitalized assets that we do capitalize and depreciate. Those will tags, and we'll continue to do those periodic inventories as per our board policy requires, and we'll still do that. So.
Good. Anything else, Sherry, you wanted to add?
No. My apologies. It's not always the most exciting presentation. There aren't like a whole lot of things I could show for this. So thank you for your patience and for listening. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to address them.
And also, as again, for background for our new members, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the district also has things that we used to refer to them as excess, meaning that they had come to the end of their life. And then my understanding is the district then places those onto an auction program, right?
Yes, we use GovDeals.
Yeah, okay.
And yes. And when assets are disposed of, that routes its way to accounting through that form that we use, and they're pulled off of the asset listing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
And we find ourselves to the third item on the agenda. And for new members again, and I'm not singling you out, but the MIP program is the district's program. It's a group. I'm sure the technology, my language isn't right, covering employee health insurance. And today we have with us Renee McGee and Linda Noggle, right, Linda? I hope we got your last name correct. We'll be presenting to the committee about that.
All right, Linda, do you want to do any lead-in or just kind of go right over to Renee?
Yeah, I think we can go just directly over to Renee, who is going to present the information to us and fill us in on the progress that we're making. I'm really proud of the district and some of the decisions that we've made over the last year to 18 months in regards to really bringing down a very large deficit that we had with MIP. We've made tremendous progress in that area. So Renee will give us an update on that. Thanks.
Can I pause just a minute? Did Tom Hoffman join us yet? Not yet?
I see him.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
I'm here, Maureen.
Tip you, Tom. I hope the committee has no objections. I had asked Tom when we covered insurance if he would be willing to sit with the committee. He has a lot of experience with our committee. I think he's served 10 to 12 years on the committee, chairman for a long time of that, and his background is in insurance, and my background is in insurance, and I know that many of you aren't. I just think it would be, he would have some good insights for us. So thank you, Renee and Linda, for it. I'm sorry for the interruption.
I want to make sure I shared my screen. Can people see the document?
What I see right now is a spreadsheet,
Okay.
a blank spreadsheet.
All right. So that's not good then. Okay. I'm going to say stop share. I'm going to try again. Here. Now can you see the MIP?
Oh,
I can.
yes, can.
Good.
Okay, are you ready? And can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, my name is Renee McGee. I'm with Perspective Consulting Partners, and we provide benefit consulting services to the Metro Interagency Insurance Program, or MIP. I presented last fall, I believe, to the committee. Was there in person. So I think I know a lot of you, or seen a lot of you actually before. But what we're going to do now is just review our current updating for MIP, which is 6 educational entities in the Cedar Rapids area. One of them is Cedar Rapids School District, but this combines all 6 entities into the reporting. We do look at it on a global basis, especially when making decisions regarding rates and plan designs. And then from there, we look at a MIP by entity report to show the fund balance share. But this first part just looks at the first 4 months of this plan year, which does run on the same fiscal years of schools, July through June. You know, I think what we can say really for MIP is that everything's been holding steady, which with COVID is a good thing. We'll look at a page in this report that does show kind of the impact that COVID had on those first few months back from April through June. But this is coming out of COVID when doctors' offices started reopening again. People started having elective surgeries again. We also hit that summertime, which is always an increase in claims experience when you know, your teachers and others have time to get elective medical care. So we always expect kind of a surge to happen in that July-August timeframe. We saw that happen again. October was a bit of a higher month as well, but really the plan's running fairly close to where projected when we look down at that plan performance meter in the bottom right-hand corner. To note is that you've seen this report before if you've been on the committee several times. We did start showing an amortized Wellmark credit column. This is really any credits that we're getting from Wellmark, including the pharmacy rebates. What happens is that Wellmark does issue pharmacy rebates every quarter, and then once a year, they will true up any remaining rebates to be paid out in one annual payment. And that happens in August. And what happens then is you get a huge credit. MIP was receiving over $1 million of credit during that time, but it was a little misleading then as to how the plan was actually performing. So we're spreading that out across the months of the plan year just to show a better representation of how the plan is truly performing.
Renee, I have just a quick question on the amortized. That has nothing to do with stop loss reimbursements or anything. It's just strictly on the fees.
It is strictly on the fees. So it's the prescription drug rebates that are received quarterly and then the one annual payment. MIP also receives some administration credit back from missed performance guarantees. So that has been amortized as well in that. But the reinsurance credits come back in the net paid claims. So they've been reflected in there.
Renee, I apologize for my elderly hearing. Did you say Walmart or Wellmark?
Wellmark.
Actually, I heard you right. I just want. Sorry, go ahead.
There probably are some Walmart prescription drug claims in there, though.
I'm sure.
So this then shows the actual claims breakout. So we show it by facility, physician, pharmacy to see where the claims are running through. This also includes then claim adjustments, the capitation, and those reinsurance reimbursements that have been received. So MIP does have a reinsurance policy where if an individual member reaches $200,000 in paid claims during the plan year, Wellmark, the reinsurer, will reimburse the plan. So through October, MIP had one individual who had met that $200,000. You could see this individual met it fairly early in August, and MIP started receiving credits back at that time already. Miscellaneous adjustments then are some credits that MIP has been receiving for the telehealth cost share waiving. You've probably heard about that. Wellmark has done a lot of promotion for their fully insured business. They also waived member cost share for their self-funded groups as well, and then reimbursed so that self-funded plans were not out any additional monies because of the decision that they made. One thing to point out in here, pharmacy is lower this year as a percentage of total claims paid. We've been seeing less in specialty medications for MIP through these first 4 months. And one claimant in particular, it is one of Cedar Rapids' highest claimants. They've changed treatment plans, and so their claims have been less so far for these first 4 months. So that's a bit of good news as well for Cedar Rapids' particular claims exposure and for MIP overall.
Did you want to mention anything about virtual visits, about how that might have helped things too?
I think the virtual visits might be a little bit of a mixed bag right now. You know, all of the plans were covering virtual visits with a 0 member cost share. When we first started looking at telehealth, and televisits are part of a requirement that public entities do cover them in the plans, Wellmark was discounting those claims at 50%. With COVID, they've raised that reimbursement rate up to 100%, so it's getting reimbursed at the same level as a member that's going to an in-office visit. So I don't think right now plans are seeing quite that value of the telehealth that we thought they would. We have seen a bit of an increase in doctors on demand, but a lot of the utilization has gone towards, just seeing your regular doctor virtually. Fixed costs, nothing too out of the ordinary here. This is mostly Wellmark's fees for administering the plan, both the medical side and the pharmacy side, their coordination with CVS for the PBM. There's network access fees to gain the discounts, the reinsurance premiums, what MIP pays to have that $200,000 per member coverage. There's also a condition support program for asthma. An additional expense that runs through MIP is Teledoc. Linmar utilizes their services. They implemented virtual visits before Wellmark started offering doctors on demand. And so they wanted a benefit for that, and they've maintained that. That is deducted from their fund balance. So it's not an actual, it runs through MIP as an expense, but it's expensed back solely to Linmar. We also have operational fees for MIP. These are our fees. There's also fees in there for the MIP board secretary, actuarial fees, audit fees. Those all are included in that. And then compliance fees are ACA required annual fees. We're paying the PCORI fee still. One thing to note is that usually we have a state assessment annually, and that has not been billed yet. So they've actually gotten behind, I think, almost by a complete year now in assessing that fee. So that's nice. That's about $60,000. That has not come through yet.
Right. But you expect it to come through, correct?
Well, we have called a couple of different times on it and they say, oh, yep, next month that should be out. And we haven't seen it yet. That was, I think the last time I checked was a couple months ago. So we're hoping maybe that is to fund a reinsurance pool at the state level. We're hoping that perhaps that pool is funded enough and that's why they haven't been too motivated to send the assessment.
Okay. Thank you.
And then one of the things that impacts any plan the most is really how your large claimants are performing and how many are on the plan. Through October, there were 4 individuals who had reached $100,000 in paid claims. And as you can see, one of those members was above that $200,000 reinsurance. But in total, the plan is paid $471,000 for that individual. But the others are below the $200,000. We're really glad to see this. At the end of last year, even though MIP's overall claims had gone down, the large claimant numbers had really spiked. So this actually is a much better large claimant year, at least for these first 4 months, both number-wise and kind of the severity-wise as well. This is a look at COVID utilization and the impact that had. As you can see, those net paid claims in April, May, and June were well under $3 million, whereas before that, MIP was running really at $3 million, $3.5 million each month on average before that period of time. You can see also utilization has gone back to kind of those normal levels once we hit July, August, September, and October. So like I said, it's really kind of back on track, although there is that gap in time where, or those period in time where there was some claim savings. And that, if we look at that plan performance meter for the first 4 months of this year, your actual cost is running above where you were accruing to. But we could see for this 10-month period, your actual costs were below that accrual funding level. That's actually how the plan is performing medically. This is a look at how the plan is performing financially, and this is really a cash basis transaction for the MIP fund. So kind of the checking accounts, the savings accounts, all of that is rolled into here, and then where the dollars flowed through each month. So the first section then is, your beginning fund balance was at $23.5 million. We take in the monthly revenues and then the monthly expenses. So when we look at your ending fund balance through October, it was at $23.6 million. So really, very stable for this year. This does include the full annual RX rebate that we talked about earlier on this. So you have already received that full credit for that in the cash basis accounting. MIP as a 28E, though, all self-funded public entities are required to hold an IBNR in reserves. So those are for claims that are incurred but not reported. So say you have a claim in June, but it doesn't get paid until July or August. They want to make sure that there's money in the plan to pay for those claims as they're accounted for. As a 28E, which is, the purchasing agreement that puts together MIP, or allows MIP actually to form, also has a requirement for a claims fluctuation reserve. And this is an additional about 16% reserve that MIP has to hold in its fund balance. These are reported quarterly to the state. They check to make sure that there are enough MIP funds available to meet these 2 reserve requirements. So while it seems like there is a lot of money in there, and $23.6 million is a lot of money, when those reserve requirements are taken into consideration, it brings down that balance to $12.4 million. Also, I always think it sounds like a lot of money till you look at how many claims are coming through. And, we looked at that, it's about 3.5 million a month, so that there's, 7.5 months of claims on hand. And after you take in that reserve entry requirement, there's only 4 months of claims on hand. So we like to make sure.
Take it in perspective, yes.
It does. And then what I think all of the committee is probably waiting for is how is Cedar Rapids doing? within the MIP fund balance. And good news, as Linda said earlier, you know, I think Cedar Rapids has had a negative balance within MIP for at least 10 years. And so as of the end of June, there was a positive balance of $539,000. Then you guys got an interest credit, so $545,000 to end the year. So it was really good and really exciting to see that happen. You know, with those changes that have been made for eligibility that Linda alluded to, as well as just better large claimant experience overall for the district has really helped that fund balance turn around to reach positive levels. So.
And again, for newer members of the committee, this is, as she said, really good news. And I don't know who Dave, I don't know who gets the compliment for that, but it is a relief to see that kind of improvement.
Maureen, if I can just give a little historical perspective. I had, as an insurance person, but also as an audit committee member, I'd worked quite a bit with Steve Graham over the last several years prior to his retirement because I think we were up to almost 5.3 million in a deficit spending. And I don't know, Sherry, if we have any history of that, but it had to do with the way that the district was allowing some members to opt out of getting coverage, but yet would get paid. So for instance, if a spouse works somewhere else, the district employee could be covered on the spouse's plan, but also take money in compensation. And so Steve had worked over with the association to try to get that reversed. And I think it probably happened 3 or 4 years ago. And that's what's really helped get the fund level back up to a positive rather than a negative. So
yeah.
that has worked well in the last probably 3 years anyway.
Thanks, Tom.
Go ahead. I was to say there was a lot of work from a lot of different people in the district to get things turned around to where they are today. There was a big conscious effort to try to equalize our benefits for our employees that increased because we had some employee groups getting very little or no insurance dollars towards insurance. And to some folks that got quite a bit of money towards insurance. And so we have, made changes to that. So we equalizing our contribution levels for our employees. But we do have some grandfather clauses in there for those groups that did have some sweeter, more rich contribution levels. Those will be there. But as the years go on, we will all be everybody will be treated the same when it comes to our health insurance contribution dollars throughout our district. And that was that had played a lot into what we're doing and to help try to get our plan in check where it needs to be. And also, I think what people mentioned is, as well as, our once our members become more, wise consumers, better consumers of insurance, I think that in itself will, also have a great impact on our plans as well. So.
Excellent. Linda, I didn't mean to, or Renee, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you want to proceed?
Well, I guess this is our last report. So I'll talk briefly. MIP has established a couple of subcommittees this year. One is the Plan Design Subcommittee. They're actually looking at adding, right now MIP has 3 core plans, and then each entity can decide if they want to offer the HMO Basic, which Cedar Rapids Schools has offered the HMO Basic. So there's 4 plan options. They're looking at adding a high deductible health plan as an option that each entity can elect if they want to offer that. So I believe it's going to be an either or option where it's either the HMO Basic or the high deductible health plan that they offer for 2021. So we're excited that there will be an HSA option that's available. The second committee is a fund balance subcommittee, and Dave has been sitting on that as well. That's taking a look at how do we keep the by entity balances in line so that, the $5 million deficit that Cedar Rapids experienced doesn't happen again? How can we catch that before it happens? As well as some of those larger balances that are out there too. If we look at Kirkwood and Linmar, Kirkwood has $8 million as their entity share and Linmar has $7.6 million. It's just, those are too high for them to be holding. So we're looking at mechanisms to both bring everyone more to the middle again and to kind of reestablish those MIP base rates over time so that, Cedar Rapids can at least stair step out of that 15% surcharge, hopefully continue with their plan growth and get back to the MIP base rates.
Excellent. Excellent.
And a lot of those changes, what we work through will actually be enrolled into the bylaws. So that will be really very important to have that there. So it's all tied into the bylaws and that everybody knows where they're standing. And if they are in a negative position, everybody knows what they need to do to get out and what the rules are, to get out and of those negative positions. And so that's kind of the goal to get to that point. And then the goal is eventually that everybody will be at the base rate goal and paying the same rates. That's where we'll want everybody to be eventually. So.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll move ahead. Thank you, Sherry and Renee. Linda and Renee, and Tom for your input too.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry, what?
Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It was good news for a change, and that's always welcome.
I wish I'd been there in person.
For sure.
And Renee and Linda, you're both welcome to stay if you would like, but if you want to leave the meeting, that's be just fine as well. So
I am going to exit. I've got another meeting. So thank you so much for having us. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to leave too, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
And do we have Brett with us?
Yes, you do.
Thank you, Brett. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put you right on the spot right away.
Okay.
I don't know if you're following on our agenda, but we did have the MIP, which is group health insurance.
Yes, I've been following. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Britt, as you can tell from your agenda, is our general counsel for the school district. But I don't know if you recall, last time you presented, we had asked you, what are the new legal issues out there? And you said, well, risk pools. And at that time, I remember there was some kind of natural gas case or something like that in Iowa that had caught a lot of attention.
Yes.
But then as I was reading the agenda, I thought, well, you didn't mean health insurance pools, did you? Or did you?
Well, no, it's not health insurance pools. It's actually a concept that has been addressed fairly recently. It involves a part of the code dealing with insurance and allowing risk pools to be formed. There's a Supreme Court case involving the School Board Association that is being reviewed on an ongoing basis. And we're trying to work with the Iowa Department of Education through an individual there, Mr. Tom Cooley, to try to get a little flexibility in the interpretation of that in terms of providing some flexibility for the district's ability to do some risk pooling. And I've been working with Dave on that. And the problem is with the Iowa Department of Education being pretty much completely overwhelmed by all of the COVID issues, that's kind of been a holding pattern at this point to explore the possibilities of potentially using a risk pool like that to cover things like equipment damage, coverage and things like that. Would that be fair to say, Dave?
that's correct.
Uh-huh.
And so I did have a comment about MIP though, and I appreciated the very detailed presentation. Part of the reason that the district was able to turn its position around is in part because of the collective bargaining law changes back in 2017. And I know that the superintendent's office, the business office, and HR really took on extraordinary measures to review the district's health insurance coverage in terms of benefits and tried to create, as Dave said, equity amongst the different employee groups. There were employee groups that didn't receive insurance, that received insurance. There were some that had insurance, there were some adjustments made. But it was all done in a very financially responsible way in order to achieve equity, or at least more equity amongst those classifications of employees. And because of the nature of collective bargaining and the changes in the collective bargaining laws making insurance an excluded subject of bargaining, we couldn't technically bargain over insurance, but we certainly had a lot of productive conversations within the collective bargaining process with all of the represented units in the district. And frankly, in my experience at the table, along with the rest of the members of the team, it was a positive experience. It was something that the district could provide benefits to classifications that weren't covered, better coverage to some groups, and still maintain very good coverage for the groups that had previously been covered. And so, sorry, Linda dropped off the call, but I know that the superintendent and Dr. Buck, and now Superintendent Bush, and then also Dave and his folks in the business office, and Linda and her folks in the HR office. They did a lot of work, and they did some great things for the district's employees while also helping to improve the district's position in MIP. And so I wanted to make sure the committee was well aware of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brett.
Sure.
Do you want to proceed now that I hijacked your thing? My apologies.
That's fine. The good thing about this letter is there's only one thing that is in pending or threatened litigation that Lynch Dallas is handling, and it's a fairly minor matter. There's a family policy compliance office that's part of the United States Department of Education. They deal with the administration of what we call FERPA. It's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act that deals with confidentiality of student records. And so there was an allegation by a parent stating that the school district failed to provide student records to the parent. We were representing the district as part of its response to this claim. The district denied all the allegations, and we responded back in December of 18, and basically the representative from the Family Policy Compliance Office informed the district that it would be dismissed. But we haven't gotten a formal dismissal order, so we had to include that in the letter here. Other than that, not that you remember a lot of the letters in the past, but there have been more issues involving equity, discrimination, things like that, and a lot of those have been cut down quite a bit. I'll say that there haven't been a lot of matters to begin with. But there's been effective administration of anti-discrimination laws, including updating anti-discrimination policies and things like that in the past that have provided a little more clarity in terms of processing, and has allowed some of these claims to be resolved internally before they got to a governmental level. But also there have been some governmental claims that, because of the district's relationship with state and federal agencies, have been able to be resolved fairly quickly, even if they've been filed at that governmental level. And so the district's efficiency in terms of addressing any type of discrimination claims has really improved a lot. And not that it was bad before, but it's improved a lot to be very practical and to get a lot of these matters resolved before they even get to that level. And we definitely want to do that, because you'll see that this has been now kind of languishing in the U.S. Department of Education for a couple of years, waiting for somebody in Washington to just stamp the signature on whatever dismissal order there will be. There's nothing else that the district needs to do with this, but we need to still report this as part of the letter, describing pending or threatened litigation claims and assessments.
Thank you.
In addition, Oh, no, I'm sorry. In addition to managing these types of things, I normally also report on a couple other things that we work with the district on in terms of managing liability and coordinating litigation. As general counsel, on a monthly basis, we track a report that helps coordinate with outside legal counsel that's appointed by the district's insurance company to defend them in regard to claims. And so we provide that updated report on a monthly basis to the superintendent, and she shares that with her cabinet. And then also we work with and have regular legal reviews with the HR folks, and we provide reports as necessary. During COVID, we've been meeting less frequently, but prior to COVID, we had meetings twice a month, usually with HR, to go over pending legal matters. And there's a report that went along with our meeting with those individuals in the HR department. In addition to that, there's 2 attorneys in our firm that are regular participants on the policy review committee. In the last year, we've recently reviewed and updated the district's facility use policies, and that was for a lot of different reasons. But number one, to make sure they were up to date, and there were not major revisions that needed to be made. There were just minor revisions, but they were all focused on indemnification, management of liability, making sure that outside groups who use the district's facilities agreed to indemnify the district and also had proof of insurance. I noticed that in the inventory part of the agenda, there's a discussion of disposal of district property. We also reviewed that policy, made sure that that was up to date. There are some provisions in the Iowa Code under 297.22 that require certain publications and things like that when district property is disposed of. And so we've also made sure that those are up to date. And then we also worked on some policies in regard to donations, because I know that there's a question about if there's a donation of equipment or some other items that the question was whether it stayed in the room or not. And there's a provision in the district's policies dealing with if a donation did purchase a specific item of equipment or technology, that wasn't something that was an employee's right to move around, but it stayed with the program. And so hopefully that'll help in terms of tracking things on an inventory basis also.
Excellent. Any questions? Being none, and just I want to point out, and this is not a criticism of Brett, and obviously well-managed assistance to the district. In his letter, he did say that there are other firms that you may hand off litigation that is they're more specialized than yours, and that information is not covered in the letter, nor would I expect it to be. And the only reason I mention it is in the event that something should come out and someone sees another law firm, they'll be informed that there are other firms that work, but at your direction, right?
Well, technically, it's at the insurance company's direction, because
sure, yes,
it's an insurance company that includes, in the contract, there's a duty to defend, and so there are some things that insurance company appoints us to handle, and there's other things that the insurance company appoints other firms to handle, and so it's really within the discretion of the insurance company to select counsel because of that duty to defend under the insurance contract. And so we're not technically assigning the work or choosing the firm if it's outside of our firm to provide the defense. But the insurance company has done a great job in assigning matters to firms that have a lot of experience and have achieved successful results for the district also. And we're a clearinghouse for all litigation matters because we provide that monthly report to the superintendent, that then the superintendent can share that with the superintendent's cabinet. And if you'd like a copy of that report, we certainly can provide a copy of that report to the audit committee. It has all pending matters, including some internal matters, but it's a good way to just have one document that encapsulates all of the active litigation and other legal matters outside of that HR report. The HR report is much more detailed and has employee names and things on that, on that. So, I'd hesitate to share that out of confidentiality purposes, but we could certainly share the copy of the litigation report that we create as a result of our coordination with outside counsel.
Brett, that makes me really nervous, for the reasons for client confidentiality, all kinds of things. I wasn't implying that you weren't giving us a good enough.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to let you know that information was out there, and so we are tracking that information, and even if we're not assigned to the case, we have regular contact with outside legal counsel to make sure that the district has a report where all of that information regarding pending litigation exists.
Why don't can we do this? If anybody feels strongly that we should see a more detailed report, that such would not compromise any kind of confidentiality, send an email to either to Dave or me. Otherwise, as for myself, I think that the letter is fine, and your appearance, of course.
Sure. Yeah, and we can redact that report to remove any confidential or sensitive information if any of the members of the committee would like to see that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brett, as usual. All right. Anybody else? All right. Till next time.
Yes. Everyone have a happy holidays. Stay safe and be well.
Thanks, Brett.
Okay, Dave, are you up?
I am. And I want to kind of quickly go through this. This is something that we would have typically done at an earlier meeting, but it's kind of given us our fiscal highlights for 2020 fiscal year that ended on June 30th. And this is a report, the same report that I would have given to the board at the September 28th board meeting. So in some of these information, may have been in, probably was included in some of the budget documents that when we had our October meeting, so that we did. But I'm going to quickly go through this in amount of time because I want to make sure we have enough time to get through the rest of our agenda items. But for the year for 2020, this is a summary of the revenues and expenditures of all of our funds and kind of the change in our fund balance at the end of the period. And what you're going to see here in this line here, and which we'll talk a little bit about in a little while, we're looking at our, and I'm mainly more concerned on the expenditure side. So we're going to highlight our deficits, what were the driving forces for these deficits here. And so you can see the general fund, we had $4 million over expenditures over revenue. We also had that in our sales tax fund of $3.3 million, and our debt service is about $3 million. So, but you can kind of see where we're at with the other funds. What happened? Our activity fund grew, our PEPL grew, and our nutrition fund grew a little bit. So, in light of our whole COVID world, which is, amazing that we were able to do that. So, so if we take a look at all of our all funds, you can kind of see the breakdown of our expenses with all funds. Salaries and benefits are all funds are about 58%. And you can see the breakdown for our expenses. When you think about the general fund, typically you always think about salaries and benefits account for about 80% of the budget. But when you look at all funds, it does not account for 80% of the budget because when you're talking about sales tax funds, our SAVE funds, our PEPL funds, they don't have staffing. Same thing with the management fund. They don't have staffing. So you really don't, or very little staffing costs. That's why that brings it back down to about 58% versus that. So we come in here, you can kind of see what our trends are in our fund balances. Our trends over. This is kind of a nice quick way you can kind of see what's happened in a general fund. You can kind of see where it was 11.1 and then went all the way, went down real low and it's climbed back up. The last couple of years we have declined a little bit on that. But when you're looking at SAVE, you can kind of see, this is one I want to point out real quick, is these are the months back here. You can kind of tell these are the years in which we would have had an influx of bond sales that came in. That's probably the driving factor why our fund balances have increased. And so then you go down, the balances start going down because you're spending those bond proceeds on the construction projects or whatever you're doing. And then we're back here. We sold some bonds as well here. So that's why you're seeing those balances go up. So why did our general fund deficit, to explain this $4 million deficit, a lot of that has to do with our special education. Our deficit grew by 2.9 million when you compare it to the prior year. And our English language learners, which is our ELL students, a lot of people like to call them, that grew by about $300,000 as well. And so those two pieces probably the biggest share of the driving factors to our expenditures exceeding revenues in the general fund. When you look at the sales tax, the $3 million, we actually we expended $2.3 million from the bond proceeds that we received in FY19. We received those bonds in FY19. The revenue was incurred in FY19, but we started spending that. We also issued, it was right there, and we also refunded, when you're looking at debt service, we refunded bonds, but we had a reserve previously that we did not have to use when we refunded them for the $30 million bond. So we were actually able to, because that was in our balances and we refunded it, actually, that $3 million really presented itself as if we spent more than the money we took in. And because we did, but we actually had those $3 million in a reserve fund. That's why it appears that our debt service went down by $3 million. Here's where we talked a little bit about, I mentioned a little bit about, general fund is salaries and benefits. If we look at general fund alone, followed by purchase services 11%, and then, so other supplies and 4%, and other items about 4%. You can see the breakdown. Our comparisons are fund balance and unspent balance. We look at our, and this one kind of is going from right to left instead of left to right. You can see the lean years, we were very low down here, and our unspent balance, and this is what we have legal authority to spend. When you that's getting very low. And then we did some staff reductions and whatnot, and also increased cash reserve levies to increase our fund balances up as well, because our fund balance was getting low as well. And so you can see where the trends are at now. Our unspent balance has been growing, which is good, to about a little over $18 million, and that closed FY20. And but our actual fund balance has declined a little bit because of some of our deficit spending, as we identified as special ed and ELL. That's a lot of that. Where are we? Where we would like to be. This is not necessarily an official goal set by the board, but this is where the board really kind of looks to where we want to be. We want to be in 5 to 10%. I like to say I want to be on the high end of that, and we are on our fund balance, and we are on unspent balance above that. And so that's good. If we start getting closer to that 10%, that's when I get very nervous. And we're there, right? We're in our where we need to be. Solvency ratio, it's the same thing, 5 to 10%. We have kind of reached an apex here in FY18, and it has declined a little bit. And part of this, too, when we talked about our equalization of benefits, we know that's also playing into our expenses because that costs more money to the district. We know we might take a hit for a little while, and we're always monitoring this because whatever we want to do, we want to make sure that our solvency ratio is at or above 10%, because that is such a big factor in the rating companies in determining what the bond rating are. If you actually start dropping below that, we probably would risk our bond ratings. And when we're in the construction mode like we are in our master facility plan, we want to make sure we keep that up. This kind of gives our total long-term debt. We can see what our legal debt margin is here. What that means, how much we can legally borrow. And so right now we have an excess about we have $400 million availability of borrowing and the law is 5% of the total assessed value. You can't go more than 5% total assessed value. Then you can kind of see our breakdown of the current bonds that we have outstanding as of June 30. We have more bonds outstanding now because we just issued some bonds and refinanced. We actually just refinanced this last week, sold bonds for this refunding, and we actually are going to save about almost $2.2 million on interest costs in the remaining of this period of time. So
Hey, we're at 105.
okay. And now if you want to go to our the budget book is no longer going to be made. We're actually going to have a current year budget, and that's how you're going to be able to see how our current year budget, and it's going to be much easier to traverse and look at things. So that's it for that. And now let's probably go to auditors unless you have questions.
All right, hearing none. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm having.
I think you're getting some feedback from your talking.
Feedback. I'm gonna move my phone. Jordan is up.
Yep, I'm here. I was just waiting for you. So as far as kind of giving an audit result and giving out a packet, usually at the November meeting, we cover all the information with the committee, but we actually don't present any or provide any hard copies or anything until the audit is approved and accepted by the board. Which usually would happen by the December meeting, but this year we have a little issue which is outside of the district's control. The federal government hasn't released a compliance supplement related to COVID funding, and the district actually did receive quite a bit of ESSER money. They received some with child nutrition as well. So we're kind of in a holding pattern until that gets released. Hopefully it should be released soon. It was supposed to be released in August, and they said mid-November, and as of today, it's still not released. So that's at least where we are and why you're not looking at us being 100% done with the audit. That being said, all of our test work and everything that we would do for the audit is completed. We've even tested those programs as if what we expect to be coming out of that supplement. So hopefully there's no surprises from here. So I'll kind of just run through where all the information is sitting at as of now. So for the financial statement audit, the biggest thing is the district received an unmodified or clean opinion. So that's the best opinion you can receive from us, or any audit firm anyways. The only real major thing that the district adopted this year was GASB statement number 95, which that just postpones the effective dates of all the other guidance. So GASB came out with that to allow the district to defer adopting any new standards. Due to COVID, they figured everybody had enough going on. No need to make some extra worries there. As far as uncorrected misstatements that we discovered during the audit this year, there were none. The only thing that there is in the prior year, the district always has a true-up payment for sales tax, which is received in November. Last year, that was about $213,000, and the district elected to just show that on the past adjustment schedule. That's how they've typically handled it. This year, what the state provided to Dave and Sherry as their estimate of what was going to be collected and what was actually collected had a difference of approximately $380,000. So we actually went ahead and booked that entry for this year and trued it up and recorded that within the financial statements as of 6/30/20, which just affects the government-wide statements and then the AR and the deferral on those. So not really huge change, but the information was available, and it was, that far different from expectation that we kind of did have to actually reflect that. As far as material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, the reports to committee, we identified none throughout our audit. For the single audit, we tested 3 major programs. The child nutrition cluster, the ESSER funding, that is the program that we were just talking about, that the district had received some funds and then had not actually, the guidance isn't out there, but we've tested as we would have expected. And then the last one was the special education cluster, which is a routine program that we test for the district. Right as it sits right now, I mean, obviously we can't tell for certain without that being issued. We're planning on issuing unmodified and clean opinions on all the major programs, and then no instances of non-compliance or any significant or material weaknesses to report over the major programs as well. So very clean audit on both the financial statement side and the program side. We do have several state compliance matters that we do test for. There are a couple of items to note here. All of these are items that the districts had findings in prior years. Kind of just fluctuates back and forth. One that happens every year is the certified enrollment. That's the difference between the district records and the submission to the state. They review it, the state comes back with changes, and then the district agrees with them or can contest. But so that's common. Next one is the daycare services fund balance deficit. And that's due to the IPERS liability being in that fund. Really causes that deficit there. So that's been in place ever since GASB 68 was adopted. The next, and that's the only fund that's on a full accrual, so it shows the liability. All the other funds, except for the nutrition, are modified accrual. So only the daycare and the nutrition fund actually have that liability in the fund. The next one is there was some deposits in excess of the financial institution limit resolution. So that's just saying that, you know, the district has more cash on hand at one institution than the resolution would allow. And then two of four investments tested did not have interest rates in excess of statutory rates established by the state rate setting committee. So just things to be aware of there. Other matters that we just want to touch base on, there were no disagreements with management. There's full cooperation from district personnel. Dave and Sherry have been great. They've also been very willing to work with us regarding the ESSER funding and kind of all the differences that we've had to encounter this year, which are out of their control and out of ours as well. So we really appreciate them and being flexible and, you know, working through us on that. The last item I want to touch base on is the board presentation will occur at the January meeting instead of at the meeting that was on Monday, right? So that's just one change from the previous years, that we'll actually cover this with the board as a whole come January, and hopefully that information is issued. If it's not issued, there's a couple routes that we can go. We can issue the financial statement and have to hold on to the compliance, but right now we think it's probably best to proceed in holding it and hoping that the supplement is released here any day now, hopefully. So as far as items I wanted to cover and touch base, that's really all I wanted to have to run through. I know I covered kind of a lot of information there real quick. So does anyone have any questions about the audit or any of the items covered?
No, Jordan, it sounds great. Dave, it sounds like you and your team did a really, really good job this year, as you always do.
And again, just so I understand it, the delay is because we don't have guidance about the CARES Act money, right?
Correct. Yep. So the federal government, for all federal funding, they release a guide that we are required to audit by. So it's been released for all of the other programs, except for the CARES funding money. So, and it even has kind of like a little guide, and this is in there every year, about, you know, just a program that for some reason a government would have that actually they didn't write up, so that, you know, it has just kind of the general what you would do, because sometimes there are some one-off programs that aren't in the supplement. So we went ahead and tested the ESSER funding kind of based on that assumption. So we're really not expecting surprises. The only thing that's kind of in doubt is, you know, the requirements on some of the availability and when you recognize it in revenue and things like that. We have a pretty good guess, but sometimes, you know, sometimes they do surprise us. So right now I think everything's right and recorded properly, but we don't know till we find out. And with CARES funding and just the purpose behind it, the money was to get the money out to the districts and to be used. So they cast a pretty wide net, right? So that also helps us feel very comfortable as well. So the purpose behind the money is to get the funding out there and for people to use it. So that's why the money showed up well in advance of the guidance of how to use
and
it.
I think that legislation was passed, what, June, I think it was? You know, so it moved along pretty fast.
Yep.
Some of the things that we had to consider with the delay here, we are going to be requesting an extension to file our CAFR award through ASBO International and our GFOA award that we typically have to have those out by the end of the December, but we're requesting an extension on those. And I've double checked all of our bond requirements for annual reports requirements we need to get out. We're within our timelines that we need to. That most of them is like April 15th. We have to make sure they had all their financial reports off to them, copies of them. And the only one that we haven't, having in question is S&P. We're going to be talking about Standards & Poor. They like to have the annual report by the end of the calendar year. And so I have going to be reaching out to them and say, what would you like in lieu of? What can I give you? I can give you our annual report that we file with the state. What would you like? Because they won't get that annual report by December 31st or January 1 is, I guess, what they really want it by. So that's the only thing. I think we'll be able to, be okay with that. That's not a requirement like we have with our bond requirements that we have in our bond documents. This is something that they typically like to have by that. And so I'm reaching out to them, let them know that due to these circumstances, they will not get the annual report until after, until a later date. So that's the only thing that's kind of holding things up.
Good. And from we know that having dropped, I don't know if that's the right word or not, the audit of the activity funds, that we're going to revisit that decision in the spring. Is that my understanding, Dave? Correct.
Yes, we'll be going back to having the discussion at the audit committee here after the new year to say, okay, what are we going to do in the spring for our AUP audit in the spring? Yes.
Excellent. Good. And I mean, if it was going to happen any year, and this year would be different just because I would think there's not very much money moving through those accounts.
Yeah, you're right. But one of the things that we'll end up having to do for the student activity funds, because there's not a lot of money moving through those accounts, there's a loss of revenue and they have expenses that they have. And we will be probably going to the school budget review committee, asking for some authority to be able to transfer on the direction of the board a certain amount of funds to be able to help support the student activity funds, because otherwise they'll have a lot of negative balances and because of that loss in revenue. So the state of Iowa has given us an opportunity to be able to go to them and ask for some authority, whether in a class action or whether if we want back authority to the SBRC. A class action would be, say, we just want to give the okay to transfer the funds. But if we want authority, we need to go through the whole channels of the SBRC and present our case. And so that's going to be our plan to know. But we're kind of holding off. I don't want to do it twice. I want to do it once. And because we're still in the midst of very low attendance, and like basketball is one of the money makers along with football. You know, those are two main money makers with regard to gate receipts. And so we'll be doing that on Student Activity Fund.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Every time I think I see a little glimmer of hope, realism takes over.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Jordan or Dave? All right, seeing none. Where are we at on the agenda? I've lost my page.
I think we're up to whether we received any complaints through our complaint system, and we have not. So we've only received one last fiscal year, and so now we're going on the Standards and Poor rating.
Okay, thank you, Dave, and you again.
Yeah. And I'll go through this very quickly. With our issuance of the two series of bonds that we are doing in 2020, because we're doing a public a offering of those, we had to do an updating on our rating with Standards and Poor, and we had a long conversation with them. We had to do fill out some documents for them, and had our conference call with them to talk through about the things we're dealing with, derecho, COVID, and all of those types of things. And our fund balance, showing our fund balance has dropped a little bit. And so the good thing is right now, they have pretty much affirmed our rating of A+ rating. And then they gave our, for our long-term rating, and also our two new issues, they gave us an A+ rating on both of those issues for 2020. So that's the good news. That's one of the things that we're want to make sure that we have, and it's something that we're very mindful of, and it does help us get bids, and also helps us with our rate as well, overall rate. And when you're going down through, I'm going to just kind of as you're reading through here, you'll kind of see some good information here about, we're talking about the COVID, a little bit about the COVID is in here. And we're talking about our enrollment, a drop. For those of you, our enrollment did drop due to, I think mainly due to derecho, but it could have had a COVID effect as well, because enrollment across the state is down. So I think there's COVID effect to that as well. But our enrollment dropped over 640 kids drop in enrollment. That's a huge hit. And if you,
Dave, I'm shocked. I hadn't noticed that number.
yeah, it's a big number for our drop. It's a big number. It's actually in a 1 year's time, that's a bigger drop than what happened in the flood in a 1 year time. In the flood, our enrollment went down about 1,100 kids over a few years. But a 1 year hit, this is big. And so we are hoping that rebounds some. We're hoping that it's some of the derecho damage caused some people to temporarily leave, and they'll be back, we're hoping. But yeah, it's a big hit that we're dealing with. So we had to talk about that. We're hoping that's going to come back up and quicker than it would have been from the flood. But time will tell. We just don't know. And we really don't know what is the COVID effect of that, what is derecho, since we were hit with both.
And to clarify for new members, when we're hoping it comes up, we don't have until next year is the magic year we're looking for, right?
Correct, because right now there's a push to the legislature to ask the there's a group of people lobbying to ask the legislature to use the enrollment numbers from the prior year in establishing our budget for the upcoming year. We're always a year behind. We're always a year behind on enrollment. So the October count date sets our budget for the next year. And so what we do have, there's a capacity to go do a budget guarantee. A budget guarantee is that it's a kind of a safety net if you have a decline in enrollment. So that allows the school district to get 1% increase in revenue based on the prior year's revenue. Increase that by 1%. And how you fund that is through property tax. It's 100% property tax driven. And so that has to be approved by the board to be able to do that. But that is a safety net. So.
Okay, thanks. I didn't
Let me see here. There's I just encourage you to take a kind of read this because there's a lot of great stuff in here about our district, and it's because we're kind of running out of time. But I just encourage the group to read the standards report because there's some nice information here about our district. So, but the good news is it's an A+ rating at this point in time. So that's good news. So
Excellent.
So now we go on to the local revenues report here. And just a refresher real quick, the local revenues report is something that we're always looking at our revenues across the district, our local revenues that are not, that's kind of the area where the fraud happened several years ago is in the local revenue side of things. So now we have a higher, more of a microscope on our local revenues, making sure that things look good as we're comparing. And you're going to see along the side here, a lot of the changes, it's a market, it's COVID market, impacts to why revenues are down, the different things. That's a lot of the issues. Like our rentals are down because we're not renting our facilities during this time. And so you're going to see those revenues are going to be down. We had, this year, we had actually a positive, a huge increase in our refund of prior expenses because we actually filed for propane tax refund and we got that in from some prior years. We didn't know we could actually request that. We found out we could, and Sherry did a lot of legwork to make sure this happened, and we got a big chunk, $60,000, or close to that in our prior year propane. Let me see. So a lot of these are COVID. We actually here, we received a disaster relief grant in a nutrition fund of $10,000. So that was something that we didn't typically have. That was kind of nice. And our Five Seasons daycare is it's we had it's just. This is the timing of our fees because we're not collecting this. We collected a little bit more quickly for our summer one, for our Five Seasons, but that was something that there was a need, and we actually did actually have a good participation in our summer Five Seasons daycare. And then next we go into our. Unless somebody has questions about local revenues, I guess I should stop. So. Okay. Here in going through our statement of revenues and expenses for our different funds, you can kind of see that. I do want to say, go back here real quick on student activity. There is nothing, this is the first year that we're able to put that local revenues into our report. Previously, student activity funds was not a part of our system. It was an outside system. That's why the AUP. So we don't have the 2 years to compare. That's why you're not seeing the comparison here. But moving, when we get into the next year, you're going to constantly see that because we're going to have the data in the system. Previously, we didn't have it in this system, in our current accounting system. It was only got rolled in at the end of the year. So that's why you don't see a comparison. All right. So you can kind of see where our total revenues are that we've year to date through October and expenses are. And you can kind of see where we have some deficits. We actually have activity fund deficit of this amount here. Our management fund, we get taxes twice a year, and we would have had, we paid out some of our early separation payments and our insurance payments already. And then you can kind of see where some of our other deficits are. Construction's happening at Coolidge. That's probably the main driving force out of sales tax, why there's a deficit today, because we're spending for the Coolidge construction. So this is unspent balance report. One of the things that you want to look at is what we're anticipating. We're anticipating right now our unspent balance right now to grow from about 30 days to 34 days for unspent balance. A lot of that driving force is our special ed deficits that we're anticipating. And so, and our ELL, that helps our unspent balance because even though it might hurt our fund balance, but we get that authority back. And I'm done. That was a quick going through that stuff. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Dave. No? Well, Dave, you're not quite done yet because I see we're not, any comments from prior meetings?
I don't believe we had any comments from prior meetings. So
And again, you know, at the back of your packet are the sheets to fill out if you have any suggestions, questions, comments. That would be, you know, fill them out and send them to Dave, or if you don't want to put your name on, send it to me and we'll keep it private, that kind of thing. Anybody else have anything else? Okay, that being said, could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second.
Second. All right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Okay.
who was that second?
John Hammer.
Okay. All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you all for coming. I hope you have a safe and happy holiday season.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Justin.
Thanks.
Bye.